me read to you the initial passage. 1 Corinthians 3:16, don't you yourselves know that you are God's temple and that the Spirit of God lives in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. For God's temple is holy, and that is what you are. So there we begin to explain this morning that the personal pronoun you, your, in the other passage in chapter 6, are all in the plural. So, yes, the Holy Spirit lives in us, indwells us. But a temple is always, a temple constitutes a lot of stones, especially when you're talking about Bible times. A lot of stones. You cannot build a temple from one stone. One stone is not a temple, but the whole building is a temple. And so the truth about the temple or the building of God actually is in our being one, our partnership. Okay, it's not single person. And so some theology developed that, yeah, you can worship all by yourself. It's just like, of course you can do that, but you can't say you can congregate all by yourself. Congregate means you are with some people. But then the him is singular, meaning one person can dramatically affect or change the complexion of the community. And so we read from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, and let me read it to you again. Don't become partners with those who do not believe, for what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship does light have with darkness? What agreement does Christ have with Belial? Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? And what agreement does the temple of God have with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will dwell and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Therefore come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord, and do not touch any unclean thing, and I will welcome you. And I will be a father to you, and you will be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty. So then, dear friends, since we have these promises, let us cleanse ourselves from every impurity of the flesh and spirit, bringing holiness to completion in the fear of the Lord. So now, what was being discussed there is the partnership. Because we are temples of God, we cannot participate in pagan or ungodly lifestyle. Now, what is happening in Corinth, we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9. And this is where we're going to pick up from tonight. I wrote to you in a letter not to associate with sexually immoral people. I do not mean the immoral people of this world or the greedy and swindlers or idolaters. Otherwise, you would have to leave the world. But actually, I wrote to you not to associate with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister and is sexually immoral or greedy, an idolater or verbally abusive, a drunkard or a swindler. Do not even eat with such a person. Now, we established already that the passage that says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, in context is not referring to marriage. Although, perhaps you can extend its application to marriage, because what fellowship has believers with unbelievers, Christ with Belial, light with darkness, righteousness with wickedness? There's no association. So now, having said that, Paul is trying to clarify something here also when it comes to association. And this is where Christians doesn't know how to make the distinction. Some, look at verse 9 again. I did not mean, because in verse 9, I wrote to you in a letter not to associate with sexually immoral people. Okay, now the problem is this. If you are not going to associate with sexually immoral people, how are you going to do evangelism? Well, verse 10 clarifies that. I did not mean the immoral people of this world. Okay, so he said, I'm not telling you not to associate with immoral. By the way, not with the people of this world. Meaning, the association with unbelievers is not forbidden, okay, because it's impossible. Because for us not to have any association with any of them means we have to die. Because we are surrounded with immoral people. We are surrounded with idolaters. We are surrounded with greedy unbelievers. So that is impossible. So Paul is not asking us to do something that is impossible. The prohibition is in verse 11. But, okay, actually I wrote you not to associate with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister and is. So the prohibition is not association with unbelievers, but association with believers, with people who claims to be a believer. Well, I'm a Christian, but they have two wives, or they are drunkards, or idolaters, or immoral people. He said that is the prohibition. Why is the prejudice like that? Well, we need some level of genuine association with unbelievers if we are going to reach them with the gospel. However, there is a built-in limitation. Okay, if we are working in the same office and I know that she is immoral, I will evangelize her. I will try to befriend her in that sense, to evangelize her. But I will have a built-in boundary because I know she's an unbeliever. I know that if I have a friend, so to speak, that is an unbeliever and is a drunkard, I know he's going to ask me to get drunk. I know if I have an association with an unbeliever who likes doing crazy things, I know they will invite me to do crazy things. Therefore, I have a built-in protection. Meaning, I know those are possibilities. So I will shine the light. And when they tell me, hey, let's go to the nightclubs and let's get drunk, I say no. By saying no, there is no association between light and darkness. I am shining light on their darkness. Therefore, association is necessary. Otherwise, where will you shine the light? The problem is this. When a person claims to be a believer, immediately what do we say? Hallelujah, praise the Lord. We embrace. We shake hands. Why? Because it's a believer. It's a fellow, it's like something is dropped. In the Philippines, it's very obvious. People who have not met each other and then suddenly, oh, you're the son of Mr. X. That's my uncle. Immediately the guard is dropped. You can sense it. And there is a welcome aura that takes place. Because he claims to be family. Our problem is association with backslidden or erring family members. And that is where Paul said association, because the level of association that we have with unbelievers is different from the level of association we have with believers. It's like the level of association that we have with non-family members is different with those who are family members. A lot of people don't use their brain when it comes to family members. They just don't. Everything just dropped, okay? And they don't know how to make distinctions. Same thing with friends. If that a person is your friend, suddenly everything seems to change. You will find in movies like the brother is already a criminal, but that's a brother. The brother is making you bankrupt. That's a brother. The son or the daughter is making you bankrupt. Oh, that's a son or a daughter. You don't know how to make a distinction. And that is a problem. That's why the strictness and the prohibition is applied to those who belong to the family. So what Paul is condemning is association with believers in terms of those who are having non-Christian practices. Now, that is easy to make. These are wolves in sheep clothing. Believers with I was mentioning this morning, you associate, you already compromise. When a person begins to associate with people in the scriptures that says, don't associate yourself with, oh, I'm not compromising, Pastor. Of course you already did. That's why you associate. because it's a prohibition. When something is prohibited and you go ahead and do it, you compromise. I know why it will be difficult to understand. Like if your parents tell you, don't associate with that person, and you associate, you disobey your parents. It's not that you will disobey. You can say, well, mom, dad, we did not do anything wrong. That's not the issue. The issue is you violated what your parents already said. So there is a violation already. And so here, that association, the moment you associate, you already compromise. You say, well, we didn't do anything. Seed is planted. Yeah, a seed is planted. I'll tell you this. Among the slum people, in the squatters, our parents will tell us, hey, don't associate with those kids. Their parents don't prohibit them from getting drunk or from taking drugs. They have no discipline. And so the parents will prohibit that. And so the kids will naturally withdraw. But then the pressure is there. So the kids will try to associate. And the parents will say, I told you not to associate with them. Oh, mom, dad, don't worry, we didn't do anything wrong. But the fact that you associate, you have to take some of their thoughts, you have to take some of their language, or there can be no association. It's impossible to have association without compromising something. Something has got to be compromised. You cannot control what other people do. You can't control what other people will expose themselves in. You can't even control what you can see. You can't even control what you can hear. That's why the prohibition is against believers. In fact, in the times of Paul, some believers even participated in non-Christian practice. I was illustrating this morning, for example, in Baguio, the sacrifices for the dead. In Nepal, some Christians, they offer animal sacrifices. You know, should the Lord bring you to Nepal one of these days, especially during their feast, you will find that in the streets, some sections, there's plenty of blood. And then Brother Willie and Ashok, the pastor, is pointing to me, a lot of sections, there will be just a piece of rock. And they put flowers, and they say, well, yesterday during the feast, they sacrificed a goat there. And you can see the blood. You know that some Christians in Nepal, these are born-again believers, they participate in that. They did not think anything is wrong. And then they have this, because when I was there, they have this parade. They march down. You know how in the Philippines you have the ati-atihan? They have something like that, but not ati-atihan, but similar to that. They ride on vehicles. And like in New Orleans during the Mardi Gras, they gave tokens. They give, I don't know what they give. You know, that's part of their voodoo practice, you know, so they do all of those things. By the way, a lot of Christians participate in Mardi Gras. Yeah, that's a pagan practice. And a lot of believers, I mean, some of you have even participated, you justify it as just you're having fun. But that's part of the compromise. Because the way it was designed is actually the service to the pagan gods. But of course, it's like some Christians who go to Las Vegas and say, oh, we're not really gambling. We are just putting coins on the slot machine. Well, you have to compromise something. You know, the last time I was stranded in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I don't know what happened. There was a typhoon, right, Ann? And I was supposed to be back on a Friday, but I could not. The flight was canceled. All flights are being canceled. And I went to the desk. I said, when is the earliest flight? He said, sir, it's going to be next week, in around 4 days. I said, why? Well, Mardi Gras is coming. The flights are full. Everybody has booked already. So after Mardi Gras, that is when it will ease up. That's when you can go back. I said, no, I cannot, because I don't want to be caught in Mardi Gras. Yeah. Now, for some Christians, it's a lot of fun. Not for me. Not for me. Because, for example, in Baguio, if the festivity worship of the gods by sacrificing animals is the compromise, a lot of Christians participate on this. A lot of Christians go to Las Vegas. They don't gamble, but they just... One of the former deacons that I have here, they went to Las Vegas and told me this. Well, Pastor will say, you know, I did not really gamble. We just have fun. I just put some coins in this slot machine. I said, and it's a deacon in this church. Lionside, a deacon in this church. If I tell you that person's name, you all respect that person, okay? But a deacon, and the excuse is, well, I didn't really gamble. I just put money. Well, what is that putting money in the slot machine? Well, it's not gambling. It's just putting coins in the slot machine. You see? We have this uncanny way of justifying activities when we are the ones doing it. But I'm telling you, Mardi Gras is for the gods of New Orleans. You know, it's what they do during those festivities, a lot of orgies, a lot of drunkenness, drugs are involved, some crimes are involved. That's what they do. But Christians have already justified in their minds because they are participating, it's okay. It's not okay. It's really not okay if you come to me and say, I went there. Okay, you went there. But I will never accept it in my mind that it is okay. This is what Paul is saying. In fact, I think, and remind me, during the funeral of your dad, right? Her family was doing something like even talking to the casket, and Anne participated. Immediately I told Anne after she prayed, I said, Anne, how dare you do that? Because she slept. It's family. How dare you do that, Anne? She said, what do you mean? I said, you're married to me. That's what I said. I didn't say you're a Christian because that will be heavier. So I just said, you're married to me. I'm a pastor. And you did that? And I did it in the church. I did it in the church. Simply because we can easily slide into a non-Christian activity, and because families and friends are involved, oh, it's okay. Yeah, that doesn't make it okay. Because the directives in the scriptures are directives that cannot be edited. And this is where and I'm illustrating to you, Anne, because she's my wife, because I don't exempt, you know. I mean, Joseph came in, and this is not even sin. This is not even a matter of sin. But he came in with a photograph of himself before he ran the race. Maybe he was hesitant about how I will feel. So I think he put a flash in his head. Something flash in his head, you know. A lightning hair. He will be dead if it's a real lightning bolt, okay? So a lightning hair. And after the race, he got it shaved, and he was laughing. And everybody, my kids were laughing, and Joseph showed it to me. Anne was laughing. Joseph showed it to me. I just look at Joseph like this. And Joseph backed off. Yeah. Now, that is not even sin. That is not even sin. I mean, you want to put polka dots in your hair? It's your garbage. Live with it, you know. But I was just wondering what happened to you. You were in Oklahoma for a month, and suddenly you want to deface your head, you know. And it's not even sin, okay? But I didn't even smile at Joseph. I didn't laugh. Well, everybody in the family laughed. But who cares if they're family? What is not acceptable is not acceptable to me. Doesn't matter if Ann laughs, if DJ laughs, if everybody laughs. Who cares whether you laugh or not? That's not my position, you see. A Christian should be able to take a stand even if you're alone. You see. Now, that is not in the matter of sin. That is not even, my illustration with Joseph is not in the matter of sin. You know, Joseph is a young man who, I don't know, at least he's not saying he's finding his identity, otherwise I'll shave his head, you know. That's a common garbage that I hear from people finding their identity. What's your last name? That's your identity, you know. But a lot of people are pulling this psychological garbage, copying everybody, simply because it's fashionable. Even if they are happy, and somebody injected something in their head, and they begin to associate themselves with it. This is not a teaching on Christian isolationism either. Why? Because Christian isolationism will not stand when we look at Jesus. Because Jesus said this, the church is supposed to be salt, light, and leaven. Okay? Salt, these are the three metaphors. Salt, light, and leaven. All of which needs to mix with. Light is useless if there is no darkness. Because everything is light. That's why, have you noticed in the New Jerusalem, there is no night there. Why is it that there's no night in the new city of Jerusalem? Huh? So what if he is light? There's no sun. Well, there's no light. Because there is no darkness. Look at the language. There is no, how can you call it light when there is no darkness? You see, the light there is different. You see, it's the glory of Jesus that lights the whole place. But there is no room for darkness. You will notice even the streets are streets of gold. There is no room for darkness. I mean, the gates are gates of solid pearl. There is just no room for darkness. Whatever God does, no room for darkness. And so, it is a city of light, the real city of light. So, the value of being salt, leaven, and light is because there is rottenness and corruption, it needs salt. There is no life, that's why you need leaven. And there is darkness, that's why you need light. So, it's not isolationism. Meaning, it is always in the mix. However, when light, leaven, salt is in the mix, what does these three things do? You put salt in a dish. You put leaven. You put not leaven. You put yeast or leaven in a dough. Okay. You put leaven in a dough. Just a little bit of yeast, for example, you put it in a dough. What does that little yeast do? It dominates. Now think about it. A little bit of salt, it dominates. Like for example, I'm not a cook, so I think some sweet cookings, I don't know if it applies to ginatan. Ikaw talaga hindi nagparinig sa'yo, ah. All the ubra na rin. You know, I think some ginatan, when you cook it, it's sweet, right? You put a little salt. I asked one time, why do you put a little salt? It brings out the taste. That little salt dominates the whole thing. You see, now look at the picture. Yeast or leaven, salt and light. Everything dominates. That's what we are. That's why go and have dominion. The problem that we have when we associate with unbelievers in activities and pagan practices, we don't dominate. We get dominated. That's what happened. And that's the danger when the one inviting us are fellow believers who claim to be Christians. Now we are really dominated. You know, can you imagine, for example, you are in Las Vegas. Are you going to stand in the middle of the casino and preach the gospel? Are you going to, for example, you go to a nightclub, are you going to rebuke the dancing ladies who are getting naked? Are you going to tell them, repent? You know, you're not going to do that. They're going to throw you out of the nightclub. You don't dominate in those areas. Unless, of course, God sends you. I told you the story about these CFNI students who went in Brazil, during the revival in Brazil. And there is this, how do you call that when witches convince? How do you call it? They have a coven, a big gathering, right? So they have a gathering of all the witches in Brazil, Satanists, Satan church members who are witches. And they were gathering, they were doing their incantations. And these two missionaries were sent by the Lord They brought revival to Brazil. They were sent by the Lord. And they just sat there because they're not participating. And so the chief priest in Brazil of the Church of Satan was doing his thing, incantation, and then he will stop. He said, something is wrong, he said. So he did it again. Something is wrong. And then he looked at the two missionaries and said, you are the wrong. Point at them and then throw them out. Because they dominate the place. The Lord sent them to a Church of Satan, and they said that the priest is a sorcerer, and he was killing a chicken and having tobacco, blowing, smoking, all of this. And he said, the Lord sent us there, and they started casting demons inside Satan's church. They dominate. When God sends you, you dominate the place. But in these cases, you are dominated. Well, Pastor said, what can I do? I'm just a guest there. You are dominated. Well, Pastor said, what am I going to do? You are dominated. That's why your question is, what am I going to do? Because you're dominated. But the picture of a leaven, picture of a salt, picture of light, it dominates. I don't care if you have a tiny little flashlight, okay? You go to a dark room, you light it. What happened? Everybody sees it. It dominates. Suddenly, it changes the aura in the room. This is supposedly our role. They are catalysts. Like Jesus, we are sent like physicians to the sick in the hospital. The domination is there. You see. So what does this all mean? Number one, stop being participants with others in ways that offends Jesus and violates His word. That's basic. These are the most basic thing that should be crossing our minds. We are about to participate in something. Does this offend Jesus? Does this offend His word? Basic question. Does this offend Jesus? Because we cannot participate in any of those activities. Because it offends the Lord. Second, be cautious and draw boundaries in our associations. These are boundaries beyond which we would not go. The Chinese proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles begin with a single step. Do not take that single step. Our problem, I think, is like little kids, when you're growing up, you will draw a line. When you're about to fight, and you will draw a line on the ground. Hanggang dyan ka lang. The moment you cross the line, you have to do something. You draw the line. That's why the bullies are not mostly the ones who draw the line. Those who are trying to be tough, they draw the line, and then they say, oh, ito, last na. Last na. Hanggang siya na pala yung umatras, di ba? But a bully will draw the line because he's looking for a fight. He draws the line. You draw the line, you have to do something. By the way, we draw lines also. But we are like those cowards who keep moving the line. You see, we keep moving the line. It's like, that is the same in any other relationship. We draw the line and then we say, okay, let's move it. I'll give you practical. Hey, kids, curfew, 10 o'clock. The kid called. Mom, can I be there at 11? Okay, 10:30. You move the line. 10:30 comes. Oh, I cannot. Okay, 11. Mom, the traffic. Okay, 12. You move the line. You are dominated. You see, and this is a problem that we have in terms of morality. We keep drawing the line. I was making illustrations before that the policy of the choir is the skirt is 1 inch above the knee. I was corrected by Mr. R.C. It's 1 inch below the knee. Then it's worse because the violation now is more sometimes. Because I was sometimes my wife will say, sweetheart, don't you think those skirts are too short? I said, well, I think they have a policy of 1 inch above the knee. Well, I was corrected. It's 1 inch below the knee. So the violation becomes even longer. But this is, I told you at one time that we have a member here, and during worship practice, He'll go to the washroom, and or he will come here and dress properly. But the moment it's done, before going to school, go to the washroom and change with a miniskirt. What is that? That is compromise in itself. Because if you do something that is not of faith, that is sin. You really don't believe it. That's why you're acting in, you're going back and forth. Anything that is not of faith is sin. So be cautious. You don't go beyond. God drew the line. God says, these are the 10 commandments. That's the line. You don't violate that. Israel started violating. Nothing seems to be happening. The blind doesn't see something is happening. Now, this is the difference. If you are blind, you will not see something is happening. The moment you start violating, something happens immediately. It starts inside. You broke something inside. And so moving the line further is easier. It's like I'm telling you, in the Philippines, very conservative. Come here to America, whoa. The conservatism is lost. In the Philippines, they're praying, Lord, I want to be married to a believer who loves you. Come to America, well, okay na rin. You know. Well, he looks like a believer. And sometimes they'll tell me, well, Pastor, they go to church anyways. You see, you move the line. I'm not saying, even Satan goes to church. Remember in Luke, a demon-possessed guy was very comfortable in the synagogue. Even Satan goes to church. I mean, he accompanies some people who comes to church. They feel comfortable. Yeah. But Jesus was light. And so it was exposed. But you and I, last week, I think I'm talking about conviction. We need to really have our convictions straight. Because at times have changed a lot. I mean, changed a lot. Even in the Philippines, same-sex marriage, LGBTQ, LGBTQ, yeah. I always forget. Okay, ABCD, you know, all of those things. We have extended marriage by marriage relatives with family members that are living with their boyfriends or girlfriends or same sex. And before they will invite us, and Anne was talking to me about it, and Anne says, shall we go? It's family. I said, no, we will not go. The kids were very small. And Anne asked me, why? I said, because what will I do? My kids will see that. Can you imagine, for example, if you have relatives, say a girl married to another girl? You say, well, they're relatives. Okay, I grant that. What if you have little kids? And these two girls show up in a party and they kiss each other. And your kids saw that. Oh, okay pala yun. What are you going to do? Preach in the middle of that gathering? So I made a decision. I told my wife, our kids are very small. They don't know how to make distinctions. So I said, we will not go to any of those meetings. We will not go to any of those gatherings. Because I do not want to explain to my kids. What they begin, but Papa, they are Tito and they are Tita. Whoa. That becomes even more difficult, you see. And so I have decided, and Anne challenged me on this one. She strengthened me this way. As to how far it will go. I said, well, the boundary is set. The boundary is set. And that is how I do it. Yeah. You cannot cross those boundaries. Because the moment you cross those boundaries, compromise is already done. Yeah. It's not going to be done. It's already done. Number 3, understand that there is a degree of friendliness with the world that is at odds with God. Although we can associate with them for the sake of evangelism and discipleship. But there is a degree of association that God doesn't approve. James 4, verse 4. James 4, verse 4. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? So whoever wants to be friend of the world becomes the enemy of God. Now, this is not just association now, because they started associating. Okay? They moved from simple association into friendship. Why? Because boundaries were not set. So the moment boundaries were not set, the association moved into friendship. And this is when James says, you adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hostility with God? Now in James is started with the greetings, brothers. Okay? Here, because of their activities, he called them, you adulterous people. Adulterous people is a term for unbelievers in the scriptures. But James called them, you adulterous people. Why? Because the association moved into friendship. The relationship with God is now adulterated because the statement is, the Lord your God is one. Whoever wants to be friend of the world becomes the enemy of God. The enemy is adversarial, hostile, adversity. That's where the name Satan came from. You become friends with Satan. That's as clear as light in the boundary. But that is what a lot of believers refuse to articulate. They just refuse to articulate the thing. So, the bond or yoke together means that two or more individuals can be so connected that methods, priorities, strategies becomes one. The moment this friendship takes place, there's got to be some form of oneness. No two people can walk together unless they agree. Compromise, you see. We watched this news when Trump, of course, Trump promised it, but he watched the news that the U.S. forces will be withdrawing most of it from Syria and Afghanistan. That's the announcement. It's not done yet, but that was the plan. Well, immediately, the moment it was announced, the Turkish army moved and started throwing rockets and bombing the Kurds. Why? Because the withdrawal signals freedom for them to do whatever they want. And the Kurds begin to feel betrayed. That's what happened. When you withdraw from something, there is betrayal. You know, like I told you, when we became a church, a part of the, aside from immorality, part of the reason was the pastor of the church where we left, they don't tithe. That's the minor offense, I guess, but they don't tithe. And their excuse was, well, our ministry is our tithe. And everybody was upset. That's not true. You're lying. Well, some of my leaders stopped giving their tithes. And they use the same reason. Their service is their tithe. And they say goodbye. They left the church. When they left, I told them, you should go back to the former church and apologize. Why? Because you offended them. You left saying because their lifestyle offends you and now you're the same. You see? And they criticized because, they could not discipline their kids. And boy, people criticize, could not discipline their kids. But then their kids become undisciplined and they could not discipline their kids. And you rebuke them and they left. And I told them also, you go back to the pastor and apologize because you criticized them saying that you could not discipline your kids. Now you yourself, you could not discipline your kids. You go and apologize. Why? Because the boundary was set. And we forget that. That's what you call as accountability. But God is very strict here. Friendship with the world is enmity with God. What you have to watch out as far as compromise is concerned is the methods. When compromise happens, this is what they do. They say, okay, these are the things that we will do and will not do.
Like if you come to a dialogue, say I participate in the first dialogue at Regent, it's called the Judeo-Christian Dialogue. They set the rules. Now this is not sin. The rules that were set were the following, and both sides were in agreement. Number one, nobody will try to convert anybody. Like the Christians will not witness to the Jews who will be present. And the Jews will not witness to the Christians. Because Jews, they rebuke Christians all the time. That was the compromise. Other compromise, nobody will speak ill about any of the activities of each side, even if it's negative in their side. That's the compromise. Meaning they have to agree on something. For compromise or association or friendship to happen, there's got to be a changing of priorities, a changing of strategies. Now, we learned that from the U.S. policies in the Middle East. At one time, we are friends with Iraq. Well, first we were friends with Iran, what do you call that, before the Ayatollah? The Shah of Iran. U.S. are friends of Shah. Well, because we are friends of Shah of Iran, we're enemies of Iraq. Well, suddenly, the Ayatollahs took a revolution and overthrew the Shahs of Iran. Well, to neutralize the Ayatollahs, the U.S. made treaty with Saddam Hussein to fight Iran. Well, Saddam Hussein went to Kuwait and so broke the treaty, and we were using Iran for a while. What happened? U.S. becomes a mockery. Why? Because you don't know where you stand politically. There's no permanent friends, permanent allies. That's called compromise. You are now using the methods of the world. Why is it wrong, and reasons for this? Because righteousness and wickedness does not have anything in common. Right and wrong doesn't have anything in common. The word for common in the Greek is fellowship based on eternal things. Now listen to this. Fellowship based on eternal things. It is partnership based on similar goals. For example, business. What is the goal of business? To make money. And so Christians will justify, well, this is just business. Well, to make money. Remember what I told you that when the papaya soap was booming in the Philippines? It made billions of pesos. Yeah. Why? Because Filipinos wants to have white skin. And the white skin wants to have brown skin, you know. And so the soap, it's crazy how Filipinos who likes to stay light skinned, they do all kinds of crazy things, you know. My brother puts all kinds of cosmetics just to make his skin lighter. Well, they were going to start a company. It includes Brother Mo and Brother Willie and some of their Chinese relatives and friends. Each will invest $1 million pesos to start. I think 12 of them. So 12 million pesos capital. Brother Mon will invest 2 million because Brother Mon will be the CEO and he will run the operation. But when everything was finalized, operation strategies were done, goals were set. Where will they get the raw materials? How will they sell the everything is set. And in papers, it's gonna make billions of pesos. And it's true, that industry is making billions of pesos now. At the end, some Chinese friends of theirs and relatives says, okay, there's a lot of money that we'll be making to avoid taxation. This is what the Chinese, to avoid taxation. This is what we will declare. We have to bribe BIR, bribe certain government agencies. This is how much we will spend, but we will avoid millions of pesos of taxes. Brother Mo and Brother Willie says, whoa, if we're going to be part of this, we pay taxes. Why? Because the Bible says, you give to Caesar what is, we pay taxes. The Chinese counterpart says, no, that's how you lose money. No, they said, we're not losing money, we are projecting billions of profits. But we're going to pay the government taxes. And they said, no. When they insist on not paying taxes, Brother Willie and Brother Mon says, remember, these are the brains of the business. They say, okay, then we'll stay as friends, but we cannot participate in business. Why? They have nothing in common. This is the word common here. most of the reason why we justify our association with ungodly practices is because of external things like profit, jobs. Well, I cannot do anything about this. That's my lifestyle. Yeah. That's my job. That's where I make money. Based on external things. The connection is not internal but external. That's why it includes business goals. This is not how righteousness is. Well, we cannot just simply say, we're just making money. Are you going to invest, for example, if you're just making money, are you going to invest in nightclubs? If you remember, well, you don't know this guy. He was supposed to come here and preach, but he changed his mind and went back to the Philippines. We have an associate pastor in the Philippines. They're rich. They have money. Why? Because they have, I think, 2 nightclubs in Olongapo City. You know, the nightclub business in Olongapo City is lucrative. Why? A lot of American GIs in Olongapo during that time. So they own 2 nightclubs and they're making millions of pesos. 2 nightclubs. Well, they got born again. They got born again. And when they got born again, one of the son became my intern, rebuked his mom and said, because the mom is the one managing the business, Mom, that's nightclub. We have naked girls there. We make people drunk there. And he said, we have street dancers. Because that's a regular nightclub in Olongapo City. And the mom says, oh, would you knock it off? We're Christians. We go to church. We pay our tithes. You know. That's just business. But Mom, that's a nightclub. Oh, the mom refused to close the nightclub. Until one day, the mom got so convicted, she closed the nightclubs. But she did not just close it. She sold the nightclub. Mom, why did you sell the nightclub? You should have let the license expire and not sold an ungodly business like that. Oh, anak, sayang. But you see, the external things is what connects. We are doing our best to separate external things from internal things. They can't be separated. Because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. That's external. You see? And this is where Christians are having confusion in. We can still draw the line. It's very difficult. It's very difficult at times. But this is something that we have to really struggle in. Remember, if there is no internal connection, then what you have is temporary arrangement. And this is where, for example, wrong marriages comes in. Now, for example, in the scriptures, what is the purpose of marriage? To perpetuate the faith. Internal. Do not let my son marry to other people except from our kind. Internal arrangement. Now, a lot of marriages are based on external arrangement. Well, he makes a lot of money. She makes a lot of money. He will take me out of poverty. External. Oh, the guy is handsome. The girl is pretty. External. No internal connections. But righteousness, internal. That's the connection. It's not external. There is no fellowship between light and darkness. Again, that's internal. There is no harmony or agreement between Christ or Belial. The word harmony there is where we get the word symphony. Okay? Like for example, if the whole band will harmonize, I mean, you cannot have the guitarist playing one key or strumming the guitar slower than the beat of the drum. You know, there's got to be some symphony. You see, to be symphony is you bring the sound together. That's called symphony. This is a picture of different instruments blending together and producing one music. Satan, Christ and Belial will not be able to produce the same music. They will not be able to produce the same music. There is no agreement between the temple of God and idols. Here, the agreement refers to something that you vote on. You know, like when we have presidential election. You vote on a president. Here, Christ and Belial cannot agree on voting on something. They cannot sit down and say, okay, let's compromise. Let's agree on what we can agree on. There is no agreement. Nothing. You see. And so the rule of God is final. There is no voting on that one. And it's interesting, in some churches, in some circles, if something, for example, the church in Scotland, the bishops were debating whether they will allow same-sex marriage. Now, the Bible prohibits that. But they were debating. The church is voting. That is Christ, that is the church associating with Belial. You see, when you cannot agree on the truth of the Scriptures, when the Scriptures is very clear, and then you say, okay, let's take it up to a vote. Well, that's association of Christ and Belial. Now, for most, this is an impossible and untenable position to be in. How can one exist in the world without compromising their values? I mean, how many of us have been in situations wherein our values are really challenged? And I don't know how many people will be able to raise their hand and say, I did not compromise. I think it's even safe to say that all compromise. You see, and that is the struggle that makes it very difficult. And this is why God promised to be our Father. I'll be your Father. He's the one who is going to sustain, strengthen, and make sure that everything is well taken care of. You know? We look at us because we sin. Sin is falling short. We always fall short. But God says, if you don't compromise, if you sanctify my temple, I'll be your Father. Now, we all know that He's our Father. I'll be your Father. I'll be your provider. For as long as Elijah did not compromise, he can even make some raven bring food to him. When the water in the brook ran out, he can even multiply the provision for this Shunammite woman, this widow, because I am your Father. And so when we sanctify the temple of God and we say, well, I will maintain the sanctity of the house of the Lord, God says, I'll be your Father. This is the reason why we need to have a proper relationship with God and what we do right now. Our problem is we are doing things without considering the heart of our Father. You know, we don't consider what will offend Him. And sometimes we say, well, you know, we can't be sustained, our family can't be sustained if we do this. Well, you follow God, the Lord will sustain you. You know, I think my wife and I leave an example before you guys. My wife could have been making a lot of money, but we set our hearts to raise our children in the fear and knowledge of God, to discipline them. And to do that, there needs to be some supervision. Now, our money doesn't increase because of that, but God certainly provided. God provided a job for my wife wherein she can bring the kids. I have extra jobs from time to time that provided some funds. Sometimes people bless us. And so in a lot of ways, God shows Himself to be a Father to us. But first, we have to make a commitment that we will do what the Father says. So what does 7:1 mean? To bring wholeness into completion. This means to be set apart for His purpose and priorities with His character. We don't only do the purpose of God. We do it with His character. We don't say, well, I'm going to do God's will with the devil's character. You know, it's like saying, well, I'm going to pray for me that I will win the lotto so I can give you the building fund. I know how many people have come to me for prayer requests. Well, pastor say, pray for this business or job of mine, that I will be promoted. I'll have salary increase, so I can give to the building program. That's not how it works. That is not how it works. You give and believe God for the blessing. We are promising God. We are trying to give God something that we don't have. That is not how it works. You do it with God's character. You do it with His method. This means also that we are committed to the priorities of other members of the faith community. No selfishness. Again, we as a congregation is temple. Okay? But a member of the congregation can hurt temple. Like, for example, what if I am a weak member of, a compromising member of the church? All of you are very strong. I have friends and relatives in this church, you know. And I could not help it. I've got a friend here or a family member who is a compromised believer. And say, well, it's okay to get drunk, you know, it's okay to commit adultery and all of those things. But because they're friends, I said, okay. Well, I come back to the fellowship. I'm only one person. And he sees me and says, hey, Pastor, say, how come you're doing that? I begin to justify. It's okay, we're not saying this. Oh, it's okay to do that. So he does the same thing. So what happened? With the action of one person, the whole temple, you begin to invite a virus that will erupt. This is what God is saying. We need to watch what is beneficial for the rest of the temple, for the rest of the body of Christ. We are not only committed to God, we are committed to one another. You know, we are committed to what offends. Like I told you, the big reason why I told my wife we will not join the parties of those in the extended family where a woman is married to another woman, etc., those is because the kids are small. How are you gonna explain to a 3-year-old? A 3-year-old walk in to a gathering of families and everybody is laughing, and you see these two people and they say, so, are you guys married? We're still living together. Oh, no, we're not. We're just living together. And this 3-year-old kid, how are you going to explain? How are you going to explain that? You know? Or say 2 women or 2 men kissing each other. How are you going to explain that? You'll have difficulty explaining that. Meaning, you did not take into consideration what offends. You know, in my family, there were times my kids will be talking to my wife or to me and say, well, this is not right. And sometimes they'll quote my sermons. Now, I can just simply ignore it and say, well, that is a sermon. This is different. What happened? I will offend their sensibilities. I will offend them. Yeah. If you are very strict when others are involved, and yet when you are involved, you are not, that's very offensive. What you're doing is putting weaknesses and cracks in the temple, and you can possibly do some harm to it. We need to seek to make others successful also. Okay. For example, if I discipline my kids and I refuse to teach discipline to the other kids of the house, that means if I think disciplining my kids brings success, then I don't want your children to be successful. You know, one of the heartaches that me and my wife had before was when we first bought our house. We were ignorant, you know. Nobody taught us there are neighborhood schools. Nobody taught us that there are some schools whose ratings is in the 30s. I mean, it's in the gutter. Nobody taught us this. We were new in America. We don't know that there are ratings in schools here. My wife is the one who searched all of that. And so we were buying our first house, and boy, it was expensive because I was pre-approved for a garage. I was only pre-approved for $50,000. I could not buy a house. And this couple, because Ann introduced us as I'm a pastor, and we only have 2 kids during the time, right? Or 2 or 3. We already have 3. We have 3 kids, and they look at our kids, and they say, oh, you're a pastor. Okay, we will no longer entertain any buyer. I know we can fetch more money because that was Clinton years, and the property values are high. God gave us favor. We will no longer entertain but we look at the house, there are some things to be repaired. But I was ready because it's something that I can handle. But, that's all we can buy. We didn't realize it was a bad neighborhood. It's by Shores High School. We didn't know that in Shores High School, we have a member here who went there. Oh, was it you? I mean, people there punch a fellow student for nothing. I mean, you can be walking, and boom, I have a contractor that worked for me, and he studied at Shores. He quit. I said, why did you quit? He said, well, why will I not quit? I was walking one day, and suddenly, boom, somebody hit me in the face. He said, I fell on the ground. He said, I don't want to go to school anymore. That was 1 block away from us. If you are a resident of Chicago, you know that. We should have been, nobody warned us. We have a neighborhood school. It's in the gutters. The rating, I think, is 24 or something out of 100. Nobody told us. Well, the painful thing was this. We found another house by Norwich. Norwich, you know where Norwich is? This is a beautiful house. The difference in the mortgage payment is $50 per month. Again, the owners like us because I'm a pastor, because God will give you favor. God was giving us favor. This owner says, okay, it could fetch more value, but because you're a pastor, this is move-in condition. It's yours. Just tell me right now that you'll take it. It's yours. I have only one request. They don't want to take anything from the house. They want to leave everything. I mean, can you imagine? So we will have the table, the chairs, and everything, the bedroom, everything. So there's only one appliance that we will take. I said, it's a weird conversation. I said, what will you take? Microwave oven. And my wife was very happy. Just microwave oven. Why? Oh, it's a very special wedding gift that we have. That has always been our oven since we got married. We cannot part. We will get. I said, okay, you can get. The person handling our buying of the house says, oh, that's too expensive. It's $50 more, we found out later. When I heard that, with all the work I have put in that first house, all the heartaches, I mean, there was one night because of it's full of dust. I sent my family out to another house. I stayed in that house alone, lonely, cold. I could not turn on the heater in the middle of winter. For $50 a month difference. Nobody told us. Which, if you interpret that, we don't want you to be successful. We can have good house in good neighborhood, but not you. So have you noticed, me and my wife, we keep pushing you for good neighborhood houses and neighborhood, the value of house of which appreciates. Why? We know. And we know you buy a house in a bad neighborhood, you lose. We don't want you to lose. We don't want you to lose. We want you to be successful. Why? Because you are part of this house. That's why we keep pushing, find a good neighborhood for your children. Why? Because we don't want to just have all the fun. Look, we're having fun with our kids as far as education is concerned. Some of you would want to have the blessings that my kids have. You can have it if you follow our instructions. You see? But some people decide, well, the realtor is my friend. That's the problem. That is the problem. And the reason why me and my wife kept sharing these things is because we've been through these things. And it hurts us that nobody taught us. That's why when we learn, and my wife keeps searching, when we learn, we set out as part of our agenda the educating of this church as far as choosing a house, a neighborhood where you can grow a family. Because we're blessed. I mean, look at our houses. Don't look on the inside, okay? Look on the outsides. It's really good. And I sell the thing, I'll make up, all my debts will be paid, and I'll have plenty to spare with. But not only did God bless us, now I have a second house. My wife's name is there, not mine, but I can live there, even if my name is not there. But you see this, we don't want to be just the ones being blessed like this, but you've got to be willing to walk the walk, and follow the path. I mean, just look at me and my wife, guys. Look, we're having fun with our children's college education. We're not thinking when the next money for tuition is going to come from. In fact, last night we were talking how smooth and how ready Joseph was to be on his own. We did not drive the kid out of the house because he was 18 years old. He did not rush to get out. We raised him that way. And now that he moved out, can you imagine he moved out? He wants to buy a new car because he's got monthly income, you know. He wants to tie up his money for the next 5 years. I said, Joseph, don't be a fool. I said, whatever the problem with Highlander is, we will fix it. And so he drove in with his car, and I compared his car with other people's. His car is better than some of the cars there. Yeah. And so it's an easy transition. He does. I drove with him going there. He didn't say, well, Papa, I'm on my own now. I'm an adult. I mean, we were looking at the houses, and all he was thinking was his mother. What would Mama think about this house? He was buying something. Oh, Papa, I better buy this right away. I said, why? Mama will come, and she will not like this. But his transition, I know he's going to have problems there. He's going to have, but boy, his transition was smooth. We don't think, where is he going to get his, I don't have money to pay for the first month rent. We don't think that way. Guys, we want you to be blessed like that, and even more. That's why we are sharing what we have received from the Lord. That's why I'm telling you guys, you're struggling with finishing college. Don't talk to people who didn't finish college. They don't know what they're talking about. Talk to people there are plenty of us here who finished college. We know how to finish college. Yeah. You want to finish masters? There are few of us here who knows how to finish a master's program. Talk to us. You want to have your doctorate? I think there are two of us here who knows how to finish a doctoral program. Don't talk to people who never finished elementary. They don't know what they're doing. You see, you want to have a successful marriage? Talk to us. We have succeeded in our marriage. We know how to have successful marriage. If you are concerned for the temple of God, you will be concerned for the success of the other members. We keep repeating to you, whatever blessings God is giving to me and my wife, it's available to all of you. Whatever reward we're going to have from the Lord is yours. Why? Because of partnership. We are a temple of God. I mean, for example, this house, blessing came to pay the utilities. Who benefit from paying the utilities? Just the walls? No, the whole building. When God pours a blessing in a house, you look at people who are being blessed in this house. You look at that and say, that's the kind of blessing that God is pouring in this house. You tell the Lord, I want that. Now, if you want more, then you can ask for more. But the moment God gives you more that we don't have, I will look at that and say, well, you bless that person with that, Lord, I want that too. Because it's a blessing to the house of God. And so you don't say, well, that's Pastor Jose or that's Brother Val and Anna May. Oh, you don't say that. You don't say that's Gerald and Kathy. You don't say that because they are part of the same temple. And whatever blessing God is putting in this temple is available to all of you. Are you listening? You don't say, well, you know, pastors' kids are disciplined. That's a blessing. You can have disciplined kids too. If you follow the revelation that God gave to us. It's the same temple. You know, the same spirit. We need to work together to make sure that this temple becomes glorious. Because that's the design of God. Amen?